Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Sabbath to all. Today, my sermon title is Defile Ourselves. The man defiles himself by the words that he speaks and his actions, which can be extremely hurtful to all. And I'd like to begin in Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? This verse describes the human heart as being deceitful and wicked, and root of sin and idolatry. The heart is the center of who we are, and it's where we make decisions. The heart is definitely wicked because it is incurably sick and depraved. Then I go to Matthew 12. 34 to 37. O generation of vipers, how can ye, being evil, speak good things? For out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh. A good man out of good treasure of the heart bringeth forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things. But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, thou shalt give account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. Matthew 12, 34, 37 is a passage from the Bible that conveys the idea that people's words reveal their hearts. Our words are a natural overflow of our thoughts and our attitudes. And what and how people say things is a reflection of what's in their hearts. Jesus says that people will be held accountable for every word that we say. Then I go to Matthew 15, 10 through 20. And he called the multitude and said unto them, Hear and understand. Not that which goeth into the mouth defile a man, but that which cometh out of the mouth that defile a man. Then came his disciples and said unto him, Knowest thou that the Pharisees were offended as they heard this saying? But he answered and said, Every plant which my heavenly Father hath not planted shall be uprooted. Let them alone. They be blind leaders of the blind, and if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. Then answered Peter and said unto him, Declare unto us this parable. And Jesus said, Are ye also yet without understanding? Do ye not yet understand that whatsoever entereth into the mouth goeth into the belly as cast out into the drought? But those things which proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart, and they defile the man. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witnesses, blasphemies. These are the things which defile the man, but to eat with unwashed hands defile not a man. Excuse me. In Matthew 15, 10 to 20, Jesus teaches that a person is defiled by what is in the heart, not by what they eat or drink. Jesus emphasizes the importance of the heart, and our lives are a reflection of our hearts. Our heart is a command center. Remember, Jesus teaches that good and evil come from the heart, and not from what we eat or from what we drink. Then I go to Mark 7. Mark 7, 14 to 23. And when he had called all people unto him, he said unto them, Heareth unto me every one of you, and understand. There is nothing from without a man that entereth into him that can defile him. But the things which come out of him, those are that defile the man. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. And when he entered into the house from the people, his disciples asked him concerning the parable. And he said unto them, Are ye so without understanding also? Do you not perceive that whatsoever thing from without enter into the man, it cannot defile him? because it entered not into his heart, but into his belly, and goeth out into the drought, purging all meats. And he said, that which cometh out of the man, that defileth the man. For far from within out of the heart of the man proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. Mark 7:14-23 is a passage where Jesus explains that the source of sin is the corruption of the heart, and that is what comes out of the person that defiles them, not what goes into them. The heart is the source of all things evil that we do. Then I go to Luke 11. Luke 11:39. And the Lord said unto him, now do you Pharisees make clean the outside of the cup and the platter, but your inward part is full of ravings and wickedness. The Lord said, you Pharisees are like those who wipe clean only the outside of the cup or bowl, leaving the inside filthy. You are foolish to ignore the greed and wickedness within you. Shouldn't the one who cleans the outside also clean the inside? Then I go to James. James 3:5-6. Even so, the tongue is a little member and boasts great things. Behold, how great a matter a little fire kindleth. And the tongue is a fire, a world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members, that it defileth the whole body, and setteth on fire the course of nature, as it set on fire of hell. James 3:5-6, the Bible warns that the tongue is a powerful tool that can cause great harm, as our tongues have the capacity to affect massive results, and emphasize that even a small amount of evil speech can have a devastating effect. The fact that the tongue is so powerful doesn't mean that everything it does is positive or negative. A man who learns to control his tongue will have gained self-control over his entire body. Remember, it's the things that proceed out of the mouth from the heart, that these are the things that defile the person. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon to all of you. Happy Lupercalia. Or should I say Happy St. Valentine's Day. It's really the same thing, isn't it? Appreciated that sermonette, Dan. Valentine's Day is all about hearts, isn't it? All about the heart. And the heart, very important to God, of course, as he pointed out in that sermonette. And I'm going to talk about the heart of Israel today, as well as, of course, our hearts. Now, have you bought your wife or your significant other some flowers and candy yet this weekend? Made reservations for some romantic getaway, some special weekend away from it all with your significant other or your spouse? If you haven't, you're a very unusual individual, because the world around you is in high gear celebrating St. Valentine's Day. The stores are full of flowers and candy, cards, and the hotel business is booming. There's big money in St. Valentine's Day, just like there is all of, I should say, Satan's holidays, trumpeted by the great false church in Rome. Now, nobody's quite sure who St. Valentine's really is, but in the complete book of American holidays, it says this. It says, my glasses on here. Everyone knows that St. Valentine's Day is that day of the year when friends and lovers express affection for one another through cards, candy, and flowers, whatever means the imagination can find. But no one is quite certain who this St. Valentine was, or more appropriately, who these Valentines were. The early lists of church martyrs reveal at least 3 Valentines, and one source boosted this number to an unwieldy 8, each of whom had his feast day, and this is significant, on February the 14th. It's also significant here that they use the word saint, and this is talking about Roman bishops and priests, of course, the place where you see people canonized as saints, right? And we all know that that means that this is talking about the church in Rome. Now, so let's remind ourselves of who the origins of St. Valentine's Day really is, because in the modern world, there wouldn't be anything called St. Valentine's Day if there wasn't a great false church in Rome. Go to Revelation chapter 17. You're all familiar with these verses, and I'm not going to read through them word for word. But as much as the world wants to escape these verses of the Bible, they're not going away. Okay? There's a great false church that's revealed here in the 17th chapter of the book of Revelation that's pretending to be Christian, pretending to represent God, when in fact, as we read here, as you continue here, what they really represent is Babylon the Great and the Babylonian mystery religion. And it's not just them. It says the mother of harlots, and so she has daughters. And this Babylonian mystery religion that's trumpeted by this false church revealed here is entrenched throughout the land, isn't it? And throughout the world, wherever they have tentacles. And you can't escape it, just like you can't escape St. Valentine's Day going on all around you right now. Now, remember I said the date, February the 14th, was significant, and the reason isn't because that there was somebody named St. Valentine's who was born on February the 14th. The Roman Empire was celebrating what's called the Roman Lupercalia way before there was a St. Valentine's Day in honor of the Roman god Lupercus. It was called the Roman Lupercalia, okay? And that was on February the 15th. They just simply changed the date to February the 14th. And really, Lupercus was a Roman version of the Greek god Pan, and you can trace all of those gods through the centuries and through their different names all the way back to Babylon. And so when God calls the false church that's promoting all this Babylon the Great, he's not kidding. He knows exactly where these things come from. Now, as the Roman Empire spread throughout civilization, or as Christianity spread throughout the Roman Empire, I should say, it was common for the pagans who were already celebrating these festivities and idolatrous customs of theirs, like the Roman Lupercalia, to start to mix these new Christian ideas they were being presented with into their pagan idolatry. And that's what happened here. Roman church leaders, obviously, were teaching these people to combine these two celebrations. In his book, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, it says, after the conversion of the imperial city, talking about Rome, the Christians still continued in the month of February the annual celebration of the Roman Lupercalia. Christians, he said, still did that, because to them there was no difference. It was all just one big celebration that they had combined, and Roman church leaders simply put a different face on a very pagan, idolatrous practice and custom that goes all the way back to Babylon if you trace it from one civilization to another. Now, I don't know what kind of celebration they had in Babylon that was similar to the Roman Lupercalia or to St. Valentine's Day? None, I'm sure. But all of these gods have roots in Babylon. And they can be traced through history back to Babylon. A lot, you know, of the people who still, participate in these things in the Great Falls Church pray to a whole host of people for a whole host of reasons at different times in different places. For example, stonemasons pray to St. Stephen. Doctors pray to St. Luke. You've seen hospitals with the name St. Luke, I'm sure. Carpenters pray to St. Joseph. And apparently, lovers all prayed to St. Valentine's because apparently he came to represent the saint for lovers, right? And a lot of these customs and practices going on all around you right now in high gear because of St. Valentine's Day come straight out of pagan idolatry. For example, again from the complete book of American holidays, it says this, you'll recognize this. Over the years, many customs were added to this celebration. One was for the names of girls to be placed in a box to be drawn by boys. Each resulting match was then considered a pair for the coming year. Everywhere that Christians came into power, they immediately adapted the holidays and customs of the people, like the Roman Lupercalia, to their own creed. It was a simple matter to call the day this drawing took place St. Valentine's Day, because he was the one lovers prayed to, right? To Christianize the heathen practice of picking lots for sweethearts, and that's a heathen practice, not a Christian practice, okay? All that was needed was to replace the names of the girls with the names of saints, right? We'll Christianize it. And to have young people emulate the particular virtue of whatever saint they drew, right? Incidentally, they still do this in some places. And of course, if you visited your child's school, you know that this goes on in high gear every year at all the public schools. They're all exchanging cards and candy that say, be my Valentine, and, you're my Valentine, and I'm your Valentine, and on and else. And so, as it says in this book, it was always more fun, of course, to pick a girl's name rather than a saint's. A little boy is going to be a lot more interested in a little girl than he is a saint, isn't he? Consequently, by at least the 19th century, which was prior to when most of us were alive, the custom had reverted back to, trying to Christianize it. But, today, so all these things just, move on and become more and more heathen and more obvious of where their roots come from. And if you visit your child's school, you can see these customs taking place right before your eyes today. Now, you might say to yourself, okay, Darrell, what's the big deal? It's just flowers and candy. You're just showing some affection for the people you care about and you love. How can that be bad or a thing that we shouldn't do? And I suppose if there wasn't a God, you could say that to yourself. But there is a God, and he's got a lot to say about all of these pagan, idolatrous customs and practices and how he expects his people to react to them and whether or not they should participate. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 12, verses I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Skip down to verse 29. When the Lord thy God shall cut off the nations from before thee, and this is talking about ancient Israel when he's bringing them into the promised land, and thou succeedest them and dwell in their land, take heed to thyself that thou be not snared by following them after that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou not inquire after their gods. Who are their gods? Lupercus, that's one of their gods. Inquire not after Lupercus, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? Even so I do likewise. Christians aren't supposed to look at these gods like Lupercus or Pan or whoever and say to themselves, hey, you know what? That sounds like fun. Let's do that and call it Christian. No way. And God's telling Israel here not to have anything to do with that. Thou shalt not do so unto the Lord thy God, for every abomination. Again, God uses language that's a lot different than ours. He doesn't mince words about all this. He just calls this how he views it. And we need to realize that this is how he views it. He calls it an abomination. Not something cute or fun that the kids are involved in. An abomination. Now, that's strong language to us. But that's just how God thinks of these things. It says, every abomination to the Lord which he hateth have they done unto their gods. And you all know, if you studied anything about ancient pagan religions, they even burned their sons and daughters in sacrifice to their gods, like Lubricus probably, and others. Whatsoever thing I command you observe to do it, do not add to it or take away from it, right? So God condemns all these mixing of pagan idolatrous customs with the worship of him or any kind of activity involving him. Now, when these things started to creep into the New Testament church, the Apostle Paul compared all this to the worship of demons, which is about as strong language as you could imagine. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 10. One of the biggest stumbling blocks for Christians today is what you see here in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. Moreover, or people who say they're Christian, I should say, not real Christians. Moreover, brethren, I would not be that you should be ignorant how that our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat the same spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. And so the idea that there's a God of the Old Testament who would tell you not to do that, but Christ wouldn't care, he's just, it's just a little harmless fun. And, what's the big deal if we put a bunch of candy in a trunk and claim it's got something to do with Christianity and do it in a church parking lot, right? I'm talking about Halloween now, of course, not St. Valentine's Day, but it's all the same thing. And any kind of practice they come up with is an attempt to get around the fact that the same being who told them not to do this anciently is the same being that's telling them now not to do those things. It's not a different being, same one. And so these arguments of theirs, well, that was then and this is now, don't hold water in light of Bible scripture. Now, he goes on to say here, talks about idolatry. Neither be ye idolaters. Idolatry is a big deal to God. A lot bigger deal than it is seemingly to human beings who don't seem to really understand it very well. In verse 14. Wherefore, my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry. Whatever idolatry is, you're not supposed to have anything to do with it, and you're not supposed to be involved in it. Okay? Go to verse 19. What I say then, that the idol is anything, or that which is offered to sacrifice idols anything? I mean, is Lubricus anything? No. Is Valentine's Day anything? No. Is the candy anything? No. None of that's anything. But if it's idolatry, which God says it is, then it's a big deal, isn't it? But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils. And so the origins of Lubricus, the origins of the false church that's trumpeting all of this, is devils. And if you're participating in it, as far as the Apostle Paul's concerned here, you're worshiping devils. You're sacrificing to devils and not to God. And I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils. We don't want to have fellowship with devils, demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of the devils. You cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and the table of devils. And so you have to draw the line. You can't say to yourself that it's no big deal. If there's anything associated with anything you know of that has to do with idolatrous practices of the past and these idolatrous gods of these pagan societies, you shouldn't have anything to do with it at all. Because God doesn't want you to. And you're actually dancing with the devil, as they say. And on top of how corrupting this is spiritually, it also has very prophetic consequences. But to understand that, again, you have to understand who we, the Anglo-Saxon English-speaking world, are. So let's remind ourselves of that real fast. Go to Genesis chapter 35. It's very important that people understand who they are if they want to understand what's going to happen in their world. And when it comes to the United States and British people, it is clear who we are if you want to understand. In Genesis chapter 35, beginning in verse 10, God's passing on the blessings that he promises that he made to Abraham of national greatness to Isaac and Jacob. And here he's talking to Jacob. And God said unto him, Thy name is Jacob, thy name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And he called his name Israel. And God said unto him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply, a nation and a company of nations shall be of thee, and kings shall come out of thee, and thy loins. And the land which I gave unto Abraham and Isaac, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed after thee will I give the land. And so all the promises that God had made to Abraham, passed on to Isaac, now fall to Jacob, who God changes the name of to Israel. And this is very significant to understand Bible prophecy. Go to Genesis chapter 48. When Jacob is about to perish, he joins Joseph and his brothers in Egypt, and he knows he needs to pass these blessings on to the successors. So he calls for the two children of Joseph who were born in Egypt, Ephraim and Manasseh. Verse 13, and Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand toward Israel's left hand, and Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near unto him. And Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands willingly, for Manasseh was the firstborn. And he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my fathers Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all my life long unto this day, the angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, these two children of Joseph, and let my name, Israel, be named on them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Now, this is very significant. Israel's name is now on the heads of Ephraim and Manasseh, and so all the blessings that God had and all the promises that God had made to Abraham, passed on to Isaac, to Jacob, is now on the heads of these two brothers named Ephraim and Manasseh. Now you can get up tomorrow morning and begin looking through the pages of history from the time you arise till the time you go to bed, and you can do that every day for the rest of your life if you want to, and you'll look in vain for two brother nations who fulfilled all those promises made to Abraham until you come to the United States and British people, and then you find two brother nations who fulfilled all of those promises precisely. And so there is no doubt today for anybody who wants to understand that Israel in Bible prophecy is the Anglo-Saxon, English-speaking world we call the United States and British people and some of the other English-speaking nations who surround us and are part of who we really are. Now, interestingly, God describes the relationship he has with our people as a romantic one, like you would on St. Valentine's Day. He calls us his wife and describes the relationship between him and Israel, our descendants, as a romantic relationship. But God doesn't want to buy us flowers and candy, I guarantee you. Because in those prophecies, God describes our people very clearly as whores and harlots and unfaithful people. Now, the last prophet that God sent to Israel before he removed them from the land was Hosea. And if there's duality in prophecy, and there is, then the message modern Israel should be listening to today is the one of Hosea. Because God's about to remove modern Israel from the land, just like he did ancient Israel, because of their sins. I've mentioned many times, and I'll mention it again. The king of the south came over 100 years ago, 125 years ago. Daniel chapter 11, verse 40, was completely fulfilled 90 years ago. We live on the precipice of Jacob's trouble. Why? What has Israel done to deserve this? What is it that God is so infuriated about that he would remove us from the land? Because that's what it says. Go to Hosea chapter 1. This is the message for modern Israel today. The same one that applied to ancient Israel right before God removed them from the land then. The beginning of the word of the Lord by Hosea. And the Lord said to Hosea, Go, take unto thee a wife of whoredoms, and children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredom, departing from the Lord. So God tells this prophet to go marry this girl to show Israel that in his sight she's a whore, and her children are all the children of whoredom. Now at this time, Gomer, who this is talking about, wasn't a whore. She was a daughter of somebody that Hosea knew, and he was marrying her. And so Israel wasn't always a whore either. Now in verse 3 it says, So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, which conceived and bare him a son. And the Lord said unto him, Call his name Jezreel, for yet a little while, and I will avenge the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. God's getting ready to remove them from the land. And he's letting them know through this whore Gomer why. And it shall come to pass at that day that I will break the vow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. Gomer conceives again, bears a daughter. God says to call her name Ramah. For I will no more have mercy upon the house of Israel. God's had it. Mercy is over. I will utterly take them away. Why? What it says in the beginning, whoredom. This is what God's infuriated about. And I will have mercy upon the house of Judah. So this doesn't apply to Judah at this time. Verse 9. She conceives again. God tells him to call this child Lo-Ami, because he says, For ye are not my people, I will not be your God. This is how infuriated God was when he brought or removed Israel from the land. This is how much God is angry about whoredom. If you were going to buy your spouse or significant other some flowers and candies today, I'm sure you wouldn't do it if you thought they were a whore, would you? Then he goes on to say, Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered, and it shall come to pass that in a place where it was said unto them, Ye are not my people, there shall be said unto them, Ye are the sons of the living God. And so the promises God made to Israel that were passed on through Isaac and Jacob and the two sons of Joseph are still in play. Even though God's removing them from the land, he's telling them this is still going to happen in spite of this. Chapter 2. It goes on and details some of the whoredom of Gomer that God's so infuriated about. Plead with your mother, plead. For she is not my wife, neither am I her husband. He's using Gomer to show them what they are like. Let her therefore put away her whoredoms out of her sight, and her adulteries from between her breasts. Quit doing this. She's a whore. She's committing adultery. She's sleeping with everybody in the land. Okay? That's who Gomer was. Verse 4, and I will not have mercy upon her children, for they be the children of whoredoms. All the children she's producing, they're bastard children. They're not mine. Get them away from me. Verse 7, and she shall follow after her lovers. No matter what God does to her, no matter what curses he brings upon her, just like today, she continues to follow after these lovers. And notice that it says that she does this, that give me thy bread and my water, my wool, my flax, mine oil, and my drink. There's a lot of money in globalism, nationally. There was then, there is now. You know, what they call free markets and, world economies. I mean, trade with each other makes things possible that wouldn't be possible otherwise, right? And Gomer was enriching herself with all these relationships she was having with all of these different men. And our people are just like that. They do the same thing. That's why they're willing to have these relationships. They want things. They're covetous. Now, after Gomer had just played herself out, and played the harlot for so long she was just spent. She was done. She was used up. She ended up on a slave block because she was so used up. Wasn't worthy of anything. Nobody would even buy her. Nobody wanted to buy her. She was that bad, which is actually sort of prophesied for our people. And God sends the prophet Hosea to buy her, in spite of the fact that she's used up. Chapter 3. Then said the Lord unto me, Go ye, love a woman beloved of her friend, yet an adulteress, according to the love of the Lord, toward the children of Israel, who look to other gods and love flagons of wine. So I bought her to me for 15 pieces of silver, and for an omer of barley, and a half of omer of barley. So Hosea goes and buys Gomer from the slave block. Nobody else wanted her, but God rescues her. Notice the next verse. And I said unto her, Thou shalt abide for many days. Thou shalt not play the harlot, and thou shalt not be for another man. So will I also be for thee. So she wasn't to lay with anybody. It's like detox. It's like go get her, buy her, put her in a room, isolation. Don't let her be with anybody, and don't you sleep with her either. Just let her be. Just like you would an alcoholic in an intervention, detox. And it tells you why in verse 4. For the children of Israel shall abide many days without a king, and without a prince, and without a sacrifice, and without an image, and without an ephod, and without teraphim. From the time God removed ancient Israel from the land until the time he reestablished them in the British Isles, they had no king. So this is the reason he did this, to show them that they would be without a king all those years wandering around. Judah had kings, but they didn't. Then verse 5, Afterwards shall the children of Israel return and seek the Lord their God and David their king, and shall fear the Lord and his goodness in the latter days. Notice that says latter days. After God destroyed the kings of David with Nebuchadnezzar in Jerusalem, the king's daughters escaped with Jeremiah, where God reestablished David's throne in the British Isles, where it is to this day. Now, I wore this tie on purpose today. Most people today, if they see you with a red tie, they think of Trump, or maybe today they think it's Valentine's Day. But I wore this because when God sees red, you know what he sees? He sees the crimson thread that was wrapped around one of the babies who was born, named Zerah, when he reestablished the throne in Great Britain and healed the breach. They had put a red thread around the baby who came out of the womb first, and the other child actually became the successor to the throne, whose right it really didn't belong to. So God healed that breach, and the way they knew that was that red thread that had been put around the first child who put their arm out and then was pulled back, and the other child came out first. And so actually they were the firstborn. As John pointed out, the firstborn meant something. And God healed that when he established the British throne again in the British Islands. So that throne exists today. And the color red, that's what God sees when he sees the color red. The red coats are coming, right? The reason they wore red is because they knew who they were. They understood that, the people who sit on the throne in England, they know who they are. Chapter 4, the message for Israel today. Hear ye the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel, for the Lord hath a controversy with the inhabitants of the land, because there is no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. Sound like any place you're familiar with? You might as well be turning on your television set, right? By swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out, and blood touches blood. You can't turn your TV on without seeing somebody murdered, right? Bloodshed everywhere you look. This is the result of the whoredom of Israel. Let's go on. Verse 4. Yet let no man strive nor reprove another, for thy people are as they that strive with the priests. Now he's laying all this at the door of the religious leaders, the priesthood, okay, and telling them where their whoring is coming from. Verse 5. No, verse 6. Go to verse 6. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee. Thou that thou shalt be no priest to me, seeing thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. Who are the priests today? We aren't, are we? Some black robe guys with the white collars, right? And it ain't just them, it's all the daughters of that church as well. That's the one that everybody's listening to, right? Billy Graham, Joel Osteen, whoever. That's who they're listening to, isn't it? It's caused them to forget the law of God. And as they were increased, so they sinned against me. Therefore I will change their glory into shame. God is pronouncing doom on these people because of their religious leaders and them following after these guys who are causing them to commit great whoredom. Verse 9. And there shall be like people, like priests, I will punish them for their ways and reward them for their doings. For they shall eat and not have enough, they shall commit whoredom and shall not increase, because they have left off to take heed to the Lord. Whoredom and wine and new wine take away their heart. My people as counsel at their stocks, and their staff declared unto them, for the spirit of whoredoms hath caused them to err, and have gone a whoring from under their God. God equates this idolatry of our people and this relationship with their priests and their religious leaders as whoredom. Make no mistake about it. And he's infuriated. Verse 18, their drink is sour, they have committed whoredom continually. Now, somebody might say, well, this ain't talking about the United States. We're a Christian nation. This has got to be talking about Buddhists or Hindus or Muslims. But no, go back to the 17th chapter of the book of Revelation. That isn't talking about Buddhists or Hindus or Muslims, is it? That's talking about people who claim to be Christian. That's talking about a great false church pretending to represent Christ. And that's the priesthood that's found in our land from coast to coast, isn't it? It's not God's priesthood and all of her daughters who all practice the same things, like St. Valentine's Day. That's the whoredom God's talking about here. Now, notice verse 4. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color. God is giving you a picture here so that you have no doubt of what he's talking about and who he's describing here. These are the same people he's talking about in Hosea. Committing whoredom. He calls her the great whore here. Decked with gold and precious stones, just like a woman on the street corner. Come to me, right? And identifies her even more clearly by talking about the roots she has in Babylon. And anybody who examines the false church and doesn't come to the conclusion that it's just another representation with a different name of the Babylonian mystery religion doesn't know anything about the Babylonian mystery religion. It's exactly who they are. God is infuriated by whoredom, what he calls whoredom, which is idolatry. Hosea spoke to Israel right before God removed them from the land anciently. And that message, those words of Hosea, should ring in the ears of our people today, because God is about to remove our people from the land again if they don't repent of this whoredom. This Babylonian mystery religion is entrenched in all of our lands, everywhere you look, from coast to coast. And to God, it's nothing but whoredom. And it's totally unacceptable. And God will root it out and destroy it. He calls it Babylon and tells us to come out of it. I encourage all of you to remain faithful to God as you have been. You're not out celebrating St. Valentine's Day today. That's good. I'm glad to see that. Because God is not amused by these things, calls it an abomination, and he will destroy it. As I said many times, I'm going to say one more time, so that everybody understands the times they're living in. These things have prophetic significance. King of the South, that you hear everybody talking about, came over 100 years ago. Daniel chapter 11, verse 40 was completely fulfilled 90 years ago. That means that the next thing in the book of Daniel to occur is what the church has been expecting to occur for a long time, and it involves Jacob's trouble. People should realize that God means what he says. The prophet of Hosea should be read from one end of this country to the other, because God is about to remove our people from the land again, whether they realize it or whether they don't, and no champion is going to save them. There's nobody that's going to stop this if God decides to do it, just like nobody could stop it then. I encourage all of you to continue to worship God in spirit and truth the way you're doing today and the way you've been doing, and as a light and a witness to this perishing world around you, rejecting the whoredom of modern Israel and the great false church, the whore in Rome, as we wait on Christ in this perishing world to establish God's kingdom and government over this planet.